Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Cleveland Clinic, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Dan Malthrop. I'm the Chief Executive here, also a proud member. This week, the CEO and Chairman of the largest investment company in the world wrote an open letter to corporate CEOs. BlackRock CEO Lawrence D. Fink does this every year, but this year was a little bit different. After noting that the stock market and those invested in it had enjoyed an extraordinary run in 2017, he then said, basically, that's not enough. I'll quote a passage. Quote, "Society is demanding that companies, both public and private, serve a social purpose. To prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. Companies must benefit all of their stakeholders, including shareholders, employees, customers, and the communities in which they operate." Now, this may sound somewhat revolutionary, putting other stakeholders on par with shareholders, but in some ways, BlackRock may simply be catching up with the leaders who are on our panel today. Our conversation today is simply about this. How can organizations, public and private companies, private equity investors, even public sector entities, thrive and deliver returns by putting values at the center of their work? At first blush, this sort of idealism might seem to fly in the face of the capitalist project of delivering a return to shareholders. And in the public sector, we find ourselves frequently grappling with the question of whose needs should be given top priority. This is all the terrain of our conversation, so let me introduce our panelists. We'll start with the man who traveled farthest. Percy Falwell is the mayor of Gander, Newfoundland, a Canadian town on the eastern side of the easternmost island in Canada that has a time zone all of its own. It is a town of about 11,000 people and one big airport. And on 9/11, when planes were diverted from U.S. airspace, 38 planes landed in Gander, bringing 6,700 passengers who had been bound for the U.S. And the story of what happened there that week is a lesson in kindness. Next to Mayor Falwell is Dina Dwyer. She's co-chairwoman of the Dwyer Group. Dina Dwyer Owens, pardon me. The co-chairwoman of the Dwyer Group. They're a franchise organization holding group based in Waco, Texas, and they are driven by core values that they put at the heart of all that they do. Dina is also the author of 2 books, including Values Incorporated, copies of which she has made available to all of you today, which you can pick up on your way out. Thank you very much for that, Dina. And lastly, we have our local hero, Stuart Cole. He's been in private equity since 1988. He's been with Riverside since 1993, where he's the co-CEO. The company has some $6 billion under management, invested in more than 80 companies. One of those companies is the Dwyer Group, full disclosure. Okay. Stuart is well known in Cleveland for his civic leadership, perhaps most visibly on the board of the Cleveland Clinic, where he helped to start Velosano, the charity bike ride dedicated to eradicating cancer. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
So as we start, too, I want to thank Values in Action for kind of bringing all of this together. There's an event tonight to honor the 3 of you and others. And so, Stuart, thank you very much for your leadership there. I want to start by asking each of you for kind of your Values in Action story, if you will. And Mayor Falwell, I'd like you to begin, please.
Certainly. Well, ours is very much a spontaneous story. It's not the events that occurred in September 11th, 2001 are well known to everybody in this room and around the world. And in a little small community that you just described in the middle of Newfoundland, an island stuck out in the North Atlantic, you might wonder how we might become engaged and 16 years later still feel like we're very much engaged in that story. As you described, I mean, what occurred in our community on that day when when all of North American airspace was closed because we are sitting on the Great Circle routes between North America and Europe, pretty well all air traffic that transits between North America and Europe pass over our heads every day, and our air traffic control center controls all that traffic. So when airspace was closed in North America, aircraft had to get on the ground quickly, and many of them were rerouted to our community, to the extent, and we didn't know how long they were there for, we didn't know who was on those aircraft, and so on. But none of that mattered. We ended up with 38 aircraft with 6,800 people who, it turns out, needed to stay with us for 4 or 5 days. We're a community at the time of about 10,000 people. So
everybody gets a buddy.
Talk about a few people coming over for a wedding. So anyway, the town has an emergency plan in place for coordination in exceptional circumstances and so on. Those things that we contemplate when we develop those plans don't usually involve 6,800 live bodies showing up unannounced. But we're a pretty hospitable people, and our story, I guess, is that in spite of the planning that was in place and so on, what came through was the generosity of our people, because it takes a lot of people to take care of 6,800 people who don't even have the benefit of their luggage which is left on the aircraft. And people from 100 different countries and every religion you could imagine and every racial origin you could imagine and every language you could imagine. So the people of our town and surrounding area, there's a lot of smaller communities around us, managed to pull that off, and we like to think that we've said, there's been a Broadway musical now written about this, and when they came and
he's not kidding.
I'm not kidding, a very successful Broadway musical, yeah. And when the writers came to visit us a number of years ago to research that, some of our locals were known to say to them, "Really, you're going to write a musical about a bunch of people making sandwiches? Good luck with that." And from what I hear, it's probably going to surpass Hamilton in its revenue.
A few Tonys later, yeah.
So they were onto something that we didn't. We just recognized as something that you would do for anybody. But I guess it was because of the context, the scale, and the fact that at the worst of times, when some of the worst of humanity was on display, there was a little shining light of some of the best of humanity. So I guess that's our story, and it's not about me. I was the deputy mayor there at the time, of course, or not of course, but I was the deputy mayor there at the time. And but it's about the people. It's about all the people that their own individual value systems summoned them to come and help out, and that's really what our story is.
The musical, for those of you who don't know, is called Come From Away, and it's called Come From Away because people who aren't from Gander would be referred to as somebody who has come from away.
When people visit our province, they're known as come from aways.
Yeah.
And Come From Away will be playing in Cleveland this summer.
That's right. That's right. Wow. Yeah, next year. Dina Dwyer-Owens, your values in action story briefly, if you would, to give people a context for
Sure.
it.
Dwyer Group is a values-guided world leader of franchise business that focus on repairing, maintaining, and enhancing your homes and businesses. So to net that out, we're really in the business of helping people have a better quality of life. We happen to use franchising as our vehicle to do that. And our founder, who happened to be my father, founded the company based on a core set of values. And he took the company public in '93, died of a sudden heart attack in '94. And as a leadership team, our biggest fear was how do we keep this culture special at Dwyer Group without having this driven entrepreneur who was all about values no longer with us. So we took his original core values and we operationalized them. They're under the theme of living rich, and that stands for respect. So the R is respect, the I is integrity, the C is customer focus, and the H is one of my favorites. Having fun in the process is how we might say it in Canada. So we believe when you live rich, treat people with respect and dignity, great things happen. And because we are a for-profit organization, we believe that profit's really the applause that we get when we take great care of people. And we are blessed to be partnered with the Riverside Company for a second time. We were the first public to private deal that they did back in 2003. We were the first company that they reacquired. And I like to think that a big part of the reason they reacquired us was because they really appreciate that we are a values-guided leader. We are not a perfect company. We're far from perfect. I'm imperfect, which means everybody on our team is probably imperfect too. And the goal is to keep our values front and center every day. And we've created a system. We're a franchise company. And what franchise companies do is we take what's most important in business, we create systems around what's most important so that they can be replicated. So the one thing that we do that most companies unfortunately haven't figured out, so I'm here to share it with anybody who wants to learn it, is create systems around those values so that day in and day out they're a way of thinking. They become part of your DNA. So anytime there's a meeting of 3 or more of our employees or franchisees, we actually take the time to focus on our values, sometimes reviewing all 15 because we have very specific behaviors that are attached to each one of those core values. Or we might just focus on a value we need to get better at. As we kicked off the new year, one of the things that we did at a meeting recently is what's the one value each of our leaders needs to get better at? And then we own that, and we work at getting better at that throughout the year.
That was all like feedback you gave each other, or you
No,
just
you have
sort
to
of
own
said,
it. You have to admit yourself, and everybody around
said-
the table is going, yeah, you do need to work on
Yeah,
that.
you said, "Hey, I have a meeting to talk to you about disrespect." Okay.
Yeah.
Stuart, so first of all, is that true what Dina said? Is that why you acquired the company twice, you and your colleagues?
Yeah, 100% true. And it's so true that after we met Dina and visited Waco, where they're headquartered, and experienced how they use their code of values to drive better results, we said we should do that too, and formalized our. I'd like to believe we always operated under principles, but we codified them and became much more rigorous in our use of them.
Give me an example. I would like to hear sort of from both of you about kind of what that looks like in practice. Go ahead,
I
Dina.
can go first. So
Yeah.
when we think about the area of respect, a lot of people might define respect differently than I would. So that's the reason why we have these core standards or values below each one of those areas. So one is listening with the intent to understand what is being said and acknowledging that what is said is important to the speaker. It's a lot of words, but it's really important. So it's about listening with the intent to really appreciate what somebody else is saying, not listening with the intent to reply, which sometimes I'm guilty of. So in the case of working with Stuart and the Riverside team, is we have to have enough respect for one another as partners that we truly are going to listen to hear what the other party's saying. And one thing I can tell you about Stuart Cole is I always know that I'm being heard. So he practices that value. Whether he had it written down before or not, it doesn't matter because he just lived it from the very moment we met him. But that would be one example of how you put it into action. So we encourage our team members and our franchisees to learn the code of values by heart, with heart, which is really memorize the values, but internalize the values so that when it comes to making a difficult decision in our business, the values should come top of mind, right? And those are the things we look to make those tough decisions.
And this gets all the way down to the plumber who works for the franchise that you operate, that you hold
Right.
in your portfolio, who is actually listening to the homeowner saying, I really don't think you should put a hole in my wall right there.
Exactly.
But that's the easiest place to put it. No. Yeah,
right. That's right.
Stuart, what about with you and your colleagues?
Yeah, so what I find so interesting about this is the Riverside Company is a private equity firm, and of course, as Dina has described, the Dwyer Group is a leading franchisor. And I don't agree with the latter characterization at all, but because I think franchise business is, it's amazing what they do in terms of changing people's lives, the hiring veterans, and the great work the industry is doing. But there are other examples that are not as shining. So if you just said what are two industries maybe not known for their values, certainly private equity would be on the list.
Yeah.
And then the other would be perhaps another one might be franchising. So I feel like we're both in industries where you might say, well, you've got to adopt what others do. You've got to race to the bottom, devalue your behavior in the industry in order to have good results. And Dwyer, by any metric, financial or otherwise, outperforms its industry wildly. Dina personally outperforms her industry, chair of the International Franchise Association, a recognized leader in that industry, precisely because they lead with values. The story of the Riverside Company, very quickly, is my co-CEO is a gentleman named Bela Sigathy, and we are each graduates of Oberlin College, and I'm very honored to have President Ambar of Oberlin College with us today. And we have a number of other OBs who work at the Riverside Company, and I'm not saying we're valued because we went to Oberlin, but maybe there's some partial correlation there as well. When Bela and I joined forces in 1993, again, we hadn't formalized all of our values, but we agreed on 2 simple rules. We'll follow the golden rule, do unto others as you would wish them to do unto you, and we'll leave great references in our wake. Those are 2 simple rules that we had. And we said...
Is that how you articulated it at the time?
Literally.
That's great.
Literally. And that's, I believe, how we have behaved, not so much me, but many colleagues who are here today and 250 others around the world. When Bale and I adopted those simple principles, we talked about the fact that we'd witnessed a lot of bad behavior in private equity, and I can give you examples of that. We'd also witnessed some excellent behavior, but we were concerned about that, and we didn't feel it was necessary to behave that way to make a living, to put food on your table. And we said, and even if we make a little less money, at least we sleep well, and when we wake up in the morning, we feel good about the guy we see in the mirror shaving. So what's so interesting to me now, looking back 25 years later, is that I would argue that actually we've done better financially. Our returns are enhanced by the fact that we have first adopted these 2 simple rules and ultimately codified them and tried to live them more a la Dina and Dwyer. I like that because that's how I think most of us would wish the world worked. So it's really nice sometimes when the world works the way you would wish it would. I think a lot about why that might be, and even the coincidence of the word valuation, which is at the heart of what we do. It's a word that's used almost every day at Riverside. The root of that word being the same as values.
Yeah, but you don't really think about it. I mean, when you talk to, other people in private equity, or you go back to Milton Friedman in 1970, we were talking about this earlier, who said the social responsibility of business is to increase its profits, and it ends there. And if a CEO wants to do something charitable, they can do it on their own time. Have you run into that kind of the obstacles and pushback in that form?
So I'm so glad you started by quoting Mr. Fink and BlackRock. They only have $6 trillion.
I know.
To put it in perspective, the entire private equity industry is about $2.5 trillion. So they are a large player, and I think it's going to lead to a very interesting discussion. I think well before that letter, though, there's been a lot of thought and discussion about what is the role of business, how much should business be regulated, how much should business self-regulate. And did Milton Friedman get it all right? Some of you may be familiar with B corporations, which are really challenging a lot of this. A lot of people are asking, and courts, I think, are starting to ask whether when boards make a decision, what are the appropriate considerations besides just the narrow definition of profit for the shareholders. But I guess what I'm arguing based on my experience would be it's very narrow or short term to argue that we can behave in less honorable ways and enhance our value. I mean, to me, that is, that if it ever worked, query, it's not going to work in a world with communications being as open and free as they are, social media being as active as it is. We can talk about millennials and the changes in their expectations. So to me, it's logical that businesses are following what Dina figured out decades ago.
Mayor Farwell, I wonder if you find it, I wonder how you see all of this sort of conversation about values from the public sector standpoint, and in particular from the Canadian public sector standpoint. We have this mythology about Canada that everybody's really nice all the time, and I don't know if that's entirely true. But
I apologize for that.
yeah. But yeah, but I wonder how you see all of this and how you see the kind of the fascination with the Gander story, right? This sort of like, we're going to make a musical about people making sandwiches. That is it all that remarkable, and why does it matter so much today?
I think, I mean, you know, the whole thing we're talking about really when we're talking about values here is, you know, human beings exhibiting care and kindness and compassion towards other people. That's what, you know, came to the surface in Gander on 9/11. Just happened to be Gander everybody landed in, you know, or not everybody, but I mean, just happened to be a focal point for that sort of thing. The opportunity for those values to come to the surface and be enacted, you know, was presented to us, and we were extremely thankful for that, and we felt blessed because things are going on in the world, disasters go on, you know, unfortunately, all too often. And you know, you feel helpless because you want to help, but it's over there, and the best you can do is write out a check, and maybe someone will do something good with it. We were presented with a real tangible opportunity to physically put arms around people and so on, right? So you know those I believe, you know, people that's not unique to Gander. We don't have any monopoly on that. I think people all over the world, regardless of where they're born, are born with some of the capacity for that. I think in the period, you know, after they're born, there are filters that get layered on them, and you know, in the environments they live in, the ideologies they grow up under, and so on, and sometimes it mutes that what I think is a basic instinct of human beings to help each other. It's a basic instinct of all other animals. Why wouldn't it be the basic instinct of humans as well? Mm-hmm. And so to the extent that, you know, the corporate community is sort of encouraging that and sort of peeling off some of those filters and those layers, I think it benefits the world greatly, because the more, and I love the fact there's a lot of young people here in this room today, and the more people are inspired by stories, whether it's by the story of Gander in 9/11, or are inspired by the values-based organization they work for in the corporate community and so on, the better off the whole world is. So, I mean, it's all, you know, like I say, you can break it down to its most fundamental. The most fundamental point here is people caring and being kind to others and showing compassion and so on. And we've all got a part to play in that. Governments have a part to play in that. Sometimes they don't do it very well. But we can only do what we can do.
I wonder if you could say more about the role of government and the role that government has to play in all of this, and in sort of being a leader in kindness. And I could be really oblique and not say what I'm actually trying to say here, but I'll try and just get to it. There's a lot of heated rhetoric right now, and a lot of people questioning the standing of the United States in the world when we talk about America first. You know, whether or not it was obviously when the 38 planes landed in Gander. You as deputy mayor didn't say, "Wait, stop, Gander first."
No.
So you stand in opposition to some forces that are, you know, at play in the world right now.
We do, and that's, you know, it's unfortunate, and it's not specific to any one government. Some are, have more profile than others, I guess. But no, it's you know, when situations like that occur, and then you know, the responses, I think those underlying responses come to the surface. The issue with governments, you know, our municipal government, as you said, I mean, we at that point, it wasn't like, well, hold on a second, if we give away all the underwear in Walmart, where are we going to get our underwear?
It's not
Which became a problem.
It's an underlying concern.
So fortunately, you know, there was no one that could stop us from giving away all the underwear in Walmart. So you know,
were people wondering? I mean, were people saying, who's going to pay the bills for this? Right. That's always the question. Who's going to pay for this? No, that didn't happen.
That was never a question. I mean, there are programs in place with our federal government for emergency measures and so on, whereby after the fact, if you keep some of the bills, you get some compensation for it, whether it was a flood or whatever it was. Right. So, you know, I guess that prospect was there and was utilized after the fact to a degree. But no, that question was never asked. It was never a question of who's going to pick up the bill. You know, like the stores. There's stories of people who fortunately we had really good weather when that was going on, and in September, and some of the people who were herded into rooms with a lot of, like a room like this probably would have had 100 people sleeping in it. Wow. So some of these people, given the nice weather, said, well, let's go to Canadian Tire, a local store, and see if we'll pick up some sleeping bags and maybe a tent and see if we'll sleep out on the lawn. It would be a nice experience. People did that, and when they showed up at the checkouts and pulled out the credit cards, we're told, are you with the people here that are stranded on the aircraft? Oh, well, just take it. There's no charge, right? I mean, that was actually happening. Those stores didn't necessarily know they were going to get compensated. I don't think they did. I don't think anybody ever did come back after them for it. But so there's those sorts of things. People couldn't go for a walk. The passengers that were stranded couldn't go for a walk because when they did, they were constantly having cars stop next to them, ask them if they wanted to ride. You couldn't. I remember my wife and I out on our front lawn one day watching some people trying to walk down the sidewalk, and so a car pulls over, and I know what the conversation is like. You need to go somewhere? What do you need? Right? I was like, no, it's okay. We're just out for a walk.
Exercise.
Okay. A few paces later, another car stops, right?
Right.
So wonder they didn't just give it up and go back on their, mat in the gym somewhere and go to sleep because they couldn't get anywhere.
Oh, I suppose that, and I think that's a story that would resonate in almost any era. But Dina, I think that your books, the way in which you're being honored tonight, echoed as it is in the letter from the BlackRock CEO. I mean, what is it about this moment where your story is so important, where Stuart's story is so important, where the mayor's story is so important? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think this story just proves that values do create value. So the more we live our values, I think the more value is created. And I'm talking about profits. And yes, some of those companies Stuart was talking about earlier that maybe are very unethical, but are driven by the dollar, they might be making some good money, but how much more money could they be making if they implemented values and really did things right? So what we're proving is that you can do things right and treat people with great respect and still have amazing profits. I must say, we've partnered with Riverside for the second time, and our company has grown 100% in the last 3.5 years. And we are more about values today than ever before because as we grow, we're $1.5 billion in system-wide sales. I take that very seriously, and so does our CEO and our leadership team, that people have told us that you can't keep this up. The larger the company gets, the harder it's going to be to keep those values alive. And we're saying we have to keep them alive because otherwise we'll die. And I just want to thank Stuart and what he's doing too. And you talked about government a second ago. We can complain about it all day long and how values aren't being practiced. And is that going to make it change? No. We've got to do something about it. And your organization, Susan, you guys are doing something about it. And that's the best thing that we can all do. So we're trying to do something about it at Dwyer. And I'm privileged to speak all over the globe about this message because people are hungry. They're hungry for this message about leading with values. And I'm blessed to have an amazing group of leaders at our company and employees across the globe and franchisees who strive to live our values. We're not perfect. We're just really working hard to live up to that bar that we've set. Yeah. And that gives me the opportunity to go and speak about this in front of other audiences. And the fact that a 37-year-old company has grown 100% in the last 3.5 years should say something to the world about the opportunities.
Yeah. Stuart Cole, have there been moments where you have looked at a very profitable company and felt like it wasn't a good fit because there weren't values in place, because you sensed something underlying in the organization, in the leadership, in the governance structure that didn't feel right?
Well, absolutely, with some frequency. So folks often ask me, well, why do you invest in this company or not that company? And they're sometimes surprised by my answer. All the obvious things in terms of quality of management and the profitability of the business and the growth prospects for the industry, all that. But the number one thing we talk about, if you were to sit in our Monday meetings, what we call the MOMs, the meeting of the minds, where we talk about every company, every new deal, every week, we ask about the efficacy of the product or the service. If the company isn't providing something that's incredibly valuable to its customer, then really all those other things they don't matter. It's not going to be sustainable. What we love about Dwyer at the end of the day is the value that it provides to its franchisee, and then they in turn provide to the homeowner, is extraordinary. and that means that the profit that they can generate is sustainable. So when we find businesses that, and this happens with some frequency in our economy, for a period of time, a company can provide a good or a service and realize excess profit, if you will, but it's not going to be sustainable, and we don't want to be the folks holding the ball when that comes to pass. In addition to that, when our teams go out and visit the company, they're required to score the company based on what we call ESG plus V. So environmental, social, governance, and values. And obviously it's preliminary. You spend a day with the company and you score.
That's besides the looking through the finances and all of that.
In addition to everything else.
In addition to everything else.
Yep.
Okay.
It's preliminary, but then if we're going to move forward, they're going to continue to examine those things. And before we make the investment, we're going to look again and score them an ESG plus V and ask ourselves, is this the kind of company we want to be involved with? And that V is very important. If the sense is that the company is rounding the corners too much, then it's not going to be our cup of tea. It's not going to be an investment for us.
Do you feel like you're giving up on potential profit at that point, or do you have investors who have taken you aside and said, listen, Stuart, this is a really good company. They're doing really well. The values thing can take a back seat.
Possibly. My answer would be that when I look at Riverside and I look at the quality of our investors, and I look at the quality of our lenders, and I look at the management teams and sellers that want to partner with us, and then very importantly, when we look at our own employees, I believe that they want to be a part of Riverside precisely because of our values.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a self-selected group. Maybe if we had behaved in other ways, we would have attracted a whole nother set of folks. But I believe that the folks who have associated themselves with Riverside, we're privileged enough to have them be a part of the Riverside family, if you will. Invest in us, lend to us, partner with us, and work for us precisely because of those values. And it's just what Dina was saying. If we were to change those values, I think people would drift away from us. And I dare say if somehow some virus spread through Gander and people weren't so kind, folks would drift off and want to live somewhere else. They're probably not living there for the weather. Not in Cleveland.
That's why we live in Cleveland.
Not in Cleveland either.
Actually,
Yeah.
Summers are amazing here. We're going to bring in questions from all of you in just a second, but Stuart and Dean, I have a sort of philosophical question for you as we wrap up this portion. What's capitalism for?
I would just say we're in a capitalistic business, I guess, because we want to help others be more successful. I mean, that's why we do what we do. So maybe that's not a good answer for this audience, but that's how I think about it. We really love what we do, and what we do is we change people's lives. We make people's lives more comfortable in their homes, and at the end of the day, we do need to be rewarded for that, and so we do need to get paid for it, but it starts first with people and taking great care of people.
Stuart?
Reflecting back 40 years ago to my education as an economics major at Oberlin College, to me, at the heart of capitalism is the allocation of capital. And societies are enormously benefited when capital is allocated wisely, and they're incredibly disadvantaged when capital is allocated poorly. And we can see so many examples of this throughout history. Imperfect though it may be, capitalism has proven to be the best way to allocate capital, so long as it's done on an even playing field with ample opportunity for all, with proper guardrails, et cetera. So I'm a proponent of capitalism. In another City Club lunch, if you wish, someday we can talk about how private equity is, I believe, a force for good, not evil, within a capitalist economy. But to me, that's at the core of capitalism.
There's definitely a longer conversation there.
Yeah, I could add to that, specifically with the Riverside.
I want to invite all of
relationship.
you to probe there a little
Yeah.
bit, but let's move to the Q&A. Today we're enjoying a forum on values in action and why values matter in business, politics, communities, and life more generally, featuring Stuart Cole, who you just heard from, co-CEO of the Riverside Company, the Honorable Percy Farwell, Mayor of the town of Gander in Newfoundland, and Dina Dwyer-Owens, co-chairman of the Dwyer Group. We're about to begin the audience Q&A, as I said, and we do welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, and those of you joining us via our webcast or our Facebook Live video. If you'd like to tweet a question, please tweet it at the City Club, and our staff will work it into the program. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can leave it in the comments there, and we'll try to work it in. Holding our microphones today are content coordinator Bliss Davis and Youth Forum Council Chair Tiolu Orsanya. May we have our first question, please?
Yes, to Adina and Stuart. I imagine immigrant entrepreneurs would be an excellent place to invest because they do tend to be, immigrants tend to be very religiously oriented and very family oriented.
You want to go first?
You go ahead.
When I think, and I live in this world of franchising, immigrants are wonderful franchisees. I mean, we have an opportunity to serve a diverse group of franchisees, right? Anybody who's interested in owning their own business and is looking to the systems that we can teach them so they can be successful in operating their businesses is a great candidate for us. And we have amazing diversity at Dwyer Group. I just love, we had basic training this week in Waco, Texas, and just looking across the room, there's just amazing diversity. I would think about immigrants for our franchisees front line. So one of the greatest needs we have in the businesses that we're in is we're lacking people growing up in the trades. So unfortunately, it's harder and harder to find great technicians who can come and take care of your homes. We've got plenty of customers, right? You all need our services, but we've got to keep growing technicians. And so we're venturing out even and doing a Women in the Trades program. One of my passions is to help more women understand there's a great opportunity for them to be in the trades. And so we're offering scholarships, just awarded 8 scholarships actually for this semester to women of all different backgrounds who love working with their hands and making a difference in the customers' lives. And they're perfect candidates. So some are immigrants, some are not immigrants. You know, it's just, we need more people as franchisees as well as people on the front lines that are hungry to build successful businesses and in the process help other people be successful.
Stuart?
Great answer. I just add, I think the technology companies have been very outspoken and articulate about how important taking advantage of immigrants, I don't mean in the negative sense, has been, and how much our country has been advantaged by the fact that people from around the world, not so many from Canada, want to come here to build lives, build families, build businesses.
Next question.
We have a question from Twitter. It is from Charles Stack, and he says, can you give some specific recommendations for scaling values as you grow from 2 to 2,000 people?
Mm-hmm. Dina Dwyer.
Yeah, I'd go back to the comment Stuart Cole made earlier, and that was about the alignment of the people that invest in Riverside's funds, the partners that they have on their team at Riverside. I think to go from the 1,000 to the 2,000, you've got to make sure that you are intentional about the people you're bringing into your organization. And part of our interview process is we talk about our values. You know, is this a good fit for you as a potential employee or even as a franchisee? Because we're not going to award you a franchise if we don't believe you're aligned with our values.
What do you ask people?
Well, we talk about who we are and do you want to be a part of this? And I want to go back to the very first time Riverside approached us. They were desperate. This young man, Lawrence Lachey at the time, wanted Dwyer Group so bad he could see this opportunity for an annuity, right? And Lauren just didn't want to give up on Dwyer. And I was a little afraid of private equity, to be honest with you. As Stuart started off, you know, there's this fear of, are they just money-hungry folks that it's all about the dollar? And our business is all about the relationship. Well, we invited them to Waco. They could see the numbers. We were publicly traded at the time. And I said, I'll invite you to Waco, but I want to know who Riverside is. I don't want to talk about the numbers at all. I want to know who are the people of Riverside, and is there a cultural fit between our two companies? And at the end of that day, as you can tell, we're here today for the second time. We felt like they truly were the principal professionals that they said that they were, and they have become that. So it's who you align yourselves with. And again, we have a diverse organization, people from many different backgrounds and many different parts of the world. But the one thing we have in common is we are aligned in our values, and that's how you take it from 1,000 to 2,000.
Stuart, you advise companies all the time on scaling, and in fact, you're depending on them to scale.
Absolutely. That's how we make money, if you will, is when they grow. And if they could all grow as fast as Dwyer, 100% over 3 years, that would work well. But I love Dina's word intentional. You need to understand the amount of time the management team spends talking about this. Overused quote, but organizations like fish, they rot from the head. If the leadership of the organization isn't committed to those values, it's not going to. It
really does just bring a nice image with it, you know.
We're finished with lunch.
Yeah.
I was so happy.
It was good.
It's not going to hold up. And we at Riverside we've scaled to 250 at Riverside itself, not to 2,000. So Dina's advice I think is most important here. But just watching that process, what I am amazed at is how much of that can be done. And again, sort of playing on Dina's words, it becomes self-reinforcing. The key is to attract the right people, hire the right people, and they will in many cases self-select. But the way that happens is we have a hiring process that involves a surprising number of meetings and interviews. It's in many ways a bottoms-up or upside-down type of hiring process. So our more junior people are very involved in it, and the net result of that is that you don't hire a lot of people that don't fit, and the few you do, the organism rejects them. Because they're not a fit, and in many cases they reject themselves because they're just a fish out of water. Sorry with all the fish analogies.
A rotting fish out of water, if you will. Next question, please.
Hi, Stuart. I think this question is primarily for you. It's about the laws. In this country and in many other countries, I can't speak specifically to Canada, the courts really emphasize valuation maximization in their decision-making. Yeah. With the exception of B corporations and a couple of very special, unique scenarios, if you don't maximize the value of my investment, I can sue you and win. Do we need to have legal changes in this country, or is this more a courts need to change the way they think about it over time, which I don't have the patience for?
And I'm far from an expert here, but I will say I agree with your analysis. If any of you have read the work by Peter Georgescu, another person would be wonderful to get on the stage here, he's identified this as a significant inhibitor, because when general counsels come in and advise boards on their responsibilities, with rare exceptions, there's this tremendous emphasis on the need to maximize near-term shareholder value. But I think this is a case where this is changing as we speak. It's evolving. Courts may lag or follow what's happening in society. But I also believe that companies are going to increasingly be able to make a compelling case that taking into consideration all of the stakeholders, taking into consideration for most institutions, what's the most valuable asset of the company? It's their brand, it's their image. And it can be sullied in today's world. It can be sullied literally overnight. So I think I believe that is we're living through a dynamic period, but it is changing.
Where does that come from? The ways in which Becky identified the courts operating. Yeah. That's not a constitutional matter. That's not.
It's literally precedent handed down by over time. The courts established a series of laws which instructed boards how to handle their responsibilities to the shareholders, and I believe reached perhaps the peak of saying your job as a shareholder is to maximize the value of the stock today, most narrowly defined.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for that. We have next question.
What advice would you give businesses who would like to make this change in their companies? Because it's one thing to start from the get-go that this is who we are, this is what we do, but for businesses who have a different process now, how do you get buy-in when it might mean short-term drop in sales revenue?
The leaders have to have it inside of them. It's all from the inside out, isn't it? So if the leadership doesn't believe in values and leading a company with values, that's going to be very challenging. I would direct you to, I have a free workbook called Create Your Culture that takes you through 6 simple steps. Not easy, but simple steps on how to really create your culture. So whether you're starting from scratch and really just identifying your core values as an organization, and it does begin with the leadership being willing to own those values and lead by example and be held accountable when they violate their own values. But you could go there and try that if it's the organization that you're in today. That would be one tool. You could go to DinaDwyerOwens.com is the website, by the way. And it's a free workbook because I want to help as many people as possible create these cultures of values-based leadership.
So I sense that part of that question is about what do you do when you're not the leader?
You either help the leader come along or you leave and you find the right organization that fits who you are and the values that you believe in. And so many young people are in the room today, and I would encourage the young people to be clear about your values. You could go to this workbook and create your own culture, right? Who are you and what's most important to you in your life today? And when you go to work for a company, find a company that's aligned with your values, but you need to be clear about what your values are. Otherwise, you might get sucked into an organization that, maybe they've got a big brand, but maybe they are not the most ethical company, and it's very easy to get caught up in, this is how we do it here, it's okay.
Stuart, as a equity and sort of stakeholder in companies, have you ever, and you no doubt sit on many company boards and so forth, have there been moments where you've gotten involved where the culture's not 100% there, but they're going through a transition and you recognize that there's influence you can have to help them make that cultural change?
Yeah, I mean, I want to start by agreeing with what Dina said at the very outset, which is I'm imperfect, Riverside's imperfect, and just about every company we've met, with the exception of Dwyer, is imperfect. It's just the nature of business. It's big, it's complicated, it's noisy, it changes quickly, and sometimes you look back and even say to yourself, what was I thinking? We don't get it right every time. But we look for companies that have the desire to get it right, have proven the ability to get it right much more often than not. And then to the extent we can, try to help them have these processes, and in many cases things we've learned from Dwyer, of how do you accelerate it or encourage it or nurture it, perhaps is the better word. Going back to the prior question, if you're trying to impose it on an organization that doesn't want it, it's not going to be successful. I don't even think the leader can do that alone. Private equity, my industry, used to be referred to as buyouts, but I think there's a case of buy-ins. You need to have tremendous buy-in. People have to want to do it. They have to recognize that it's going to improve the quality of their life.
I'd like to add to that, because you're right, Stuart. When we, our founder passed away in '94, and then we came up with these operationalized values, we didn't just say to the employees, and there were about 125 employees at that time, okay, starting today, here are the new values we're going to lead by. Instead, we gamified the values, and we basically said, employees, we need your help, because we knew we needed their buy-in or they would never work. Plus, we had not demonstrated our commitment as a leadership team yet to live by those values. So we handed them a laminated card, and we said, for 90 days, we want your feedback. And that came in the form of a simple beep. We're from Waco again, kind of silly. But they studied those values, and anytime they caught a management team member violating one of the values over that 90-day period, they would verbally beep us. You guys remember the Roadrunner? Sounded like he was racing through our buildings for the 90 days because we were not very good at those new values. But the great news is the employees were committed to helping us. At the end of the 90 days, we brought them back together, and they said they loved it. They thought it was a great solution. They added a value that actually is one of the hardest ones we have today. But we got their buy-in because we asked them to help us be good at it.
What was that value?
What they added was, okay, listen carefully. They added never saying anything about anyone that you would not say to him or her. They said there's so much drama created in organizations because people don't have the courage to get face-to-face with the person that can do something about it.
Yeah.
And so I would say, for me, that's probably the hardest one.
Back to the golden rule. Next question.
It struck me that as you were talking about all the charitable missions that you seem to all have as for-profit entities, when we just went through tax reform, the concept of not-for-profits was really drawn into question. And I just was wondering if you had personal opinions upon the blurring distinction of those that exist for charitable missions and those entities that are really enveloping charitable missions also as a for-profit. What's the distinction between not-for-profit and for-profit to some degree?
She sits on my board here. We're a nonprofit, just FYI, just full disclosure.
It's a big, tough question that Christian asks, precisely because I think lines are blurring. And I just want to point out a lot of the blur is good blur, I think, because I work with a number of nonprofits, and my sense is that over the last years we've seen a dramatic improvement in the performance of nonprofits. I think that today nonprofits have, in some cases, some of the best CEOs in Cleveland are running nonprofit organizations. Dan is doing a great job right here.
Thank you.
That's partially because I think people have realized these jobs are extremely fulfilling and rewarding. They may not be quite as rewarding financially, but they bring so many other rewards. It's partially because I think nonprofit organizations are willing now to compensate in ways that make them more competitive to attract and retain the best talent as well. And it's partially because just as a world, as a society, as an economy, our businesses are getting better and better. We're being trained better. The technology enables more. So once upon a time, maybe it had to be this very large, successful corporation to take advantage of this training and this technology. But today, startups can literally just embrace it and emerge. So I think we're seeing a wonderful period for nonprofits. There may be some consolidation going on because maybe the world doesn't need as many, but the survivors are really emerging as great organizations. Simultaneously, maybe there's this recognition among for-profits that for-profits can address some of society's crying needs, most important needs, and this capitalism and the allocation of capital can do it successfully. But it does create this overlap, this blur. I'm not smart enough to figure out how this is going to evolve or where it's going to end, but maybe that's part of what we're witnessing. I would just say all of us who are civically active should be picking nonprofit organizations that appeal to you, that it's a cause that's important to you, and we should be challenging these organizations to do more, to get better, to be better resourced when necessary, to consolidate for greater effectiveness. I think that's the community's responsibility, and then to give them the resources they need to succeed. I will do a very short commercial for Velasana, which I think is you referenced at the outset, Dan, and thank you for that, which I think is such a great example of that. Here we are 4 years later, and we've raised $12.5 million for research to find cures for cancer. The research is being done right here in our community by doctors and scientists at the Cleveland Clinic and beyond, who are our neighbors, doing cutting-edge research. And that money all came because folks in Cleveland gathered together, and the Cleveland Clinic was a fantastic sponsoring organization, and Cleveland Indians got on board and brought their big bats to it, and Paul Dolan has been an amazing co-chair. And we said together we can create something literally out of whole cloth, out of nothing. And I'm proud of what we've created already, but we've just begun. And this year we're going to have perhaps as many as 2,500 riders raising as much as $5 million for this cause. And we can just keep growing from here. So that's nonprofit. It's modern. It's active. It's very a real sense of effectiveness and urgency.
Thank you. Another question?
I'd like to turn to Mayor Farwell. And first of all, thank you and your community for your heroic endeavors during a very dark time. and ask if you can articulate any lasting cultural shift in your community since then.
There's certainly been the legacy of it is, I mean, you know, we talk about the corporate world and how, you know, values-based companies, hopefully there's some benefit settles to the bottom line, and I think there's some evidence of that. In a community, that's, you know, there are certainly, our community didn't respond with any expectation of reward, but has been rewarded greatly, primarily through the satisfaction and fulfillment of actually having been able to enact a value that is lying within all of us. But there are other more tangible and economic benefits that accrue from that sort of thing as well. I mean, the goodwill is not only an asset that appears on the balance sheet of a corporation, and goodwill towards a community can manifest itself in potentially investment attraction, certainly tourism attractions, those sorts of things. There's the lasting benefit to our community and others, hopefully, of the fact that, you know, a big deal has been made of this, and we didn't ask for it, but we appreciate it. And there is a Broadway musical that is very high, and there is going to be a Hollywood movie.
Really?
Yes.
There's
already
and they'll
producers.
shoot it in Gander?
They may shoot. They're going to try to shoot some. I don't know. You know, I don't know if the technical capacity is there for a lot of what they want to do. This is not a small budget film. There's going to be a Hollywood movie. But to the extent that
brief window to capitalize on the sort of like come from away tourism, you know, give people the experience, get off the plane, stay with the local,
get a hug,
get a hug.
That's what we've kind of struggled with is, you know, how do people come looking, you know, having been inspired to come based on that? What do we do? Do we say, well, you're new in town, give them a hug and ask them to come home for a shower? Because that's kind of what was going on. To the extent that people, you know, anywhere are being inspired by the telling of this story and are inclined to do acts of kindness based on it and probably, you know, dredges up some things within themselves. That's a huge benefit going forward to not just our community, but others. And there's evidence of it in our community. We've also, in the last few years now, between the town and some of the local churches and local organizations, taken upon ourselves to sponsor 5 Syrian refugee families that have moved to our town and to an adjacent town. And they are integrating into our community. There's a guy my wife picked up a slab of pizza from the other day. She said, I couldn't understand anything he said. And I said, no, he's learning the language, but he makes good pizza. and he feels really good about being able to contribute and these people have young children. I'm a member of the Masonic Lodge in Gander, past master, and our lodge holds an annual Christmas party for the young children of members. And that's been opened up this year to include the children of these Syrian families. And the folks that I don't have young children anymore, and I wasn't there at that party, but the folks I spoke to that were there said it did their heart good to see the excitement on those Syrian children who completely surrounded Santa Claus when he showed up and couldn't believe, and that they were actually getting their own little personal gift from Santa at this party. It was meant the world to everybody that had in the lodge that we jointly fund the little party for the kids, right? So to the extent that those things are happening, one of the passengers we had on 9/11 had a small marketing company in, I want to say, Texas. Anyway, he was very inspired and moved by the whole experience. It went back to his company, and every September 11th since then has broken his staff up into teams of 2, given each team $100 and said, go do 3 acts of kindness for somebody on September 11th. And that's gaining some momentum and so on too, right? So to the extent that those things are happening, around the way. And this guy, by the way, has written a book that's available. Channel. Someone will give that to someone. Channel of Peace.
No.
Thank you.
And there's
very
been
much.
another book written about, it's called The Day the World Came to Town by a journalist who happened to get it.
That's the mayor's wife right there, by
These
the way.
things,
Mayor, we've got to wrap it up, but Mayor Percy Farwell is from Gander, Newfoundland. Stuart Cole of Riverside Company and Dina Dwyer-Owens of the Dwyer Group have been our guests and our panelists today, where we've been enjoying a forum on why values matter in business, politics, communities, and life. Today's forum is the Herbert and Eddie Borstein Endowed Forum, made possible by a generous gift from Mr. and Mrs. Borstein. We appreciate their continued support of City Club. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Our forum is adjourned. Thank you. That was fun.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Cleveland Clinic, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland Incorporated.